Bongseong, Gwanak District, Seoul, South Korea. Early morning on March 27, 2016, like any ordinary day, a family of 8 living on the second floor of an old 2-story house was fast asleep. At 5:00 a.m., the father got up to wake his elderly father in the next room, stopped by the restroom for a moment, and then returned to his bedroom to grab some more sleep. However, just as he was about to lie back down, he suddenly heard his father scream loudly from the living room. Alarmed, he rushed out and saw a fire erupting in the laundry area. Without hesitation, he threw the drying rack outside to prevent the fire from spreading. But that wasn't the end of it. The father remembered that his 3 daughters were still sleeping in the small adjacent room. Without a moment to lose, he rushed toward their room. Yet another shock awaited him. He found the door locked from the inside, something his daughters had never done before. Sensing something was terribly wrong, the father used all his strength to break down the door to save his children. But just 5 seconds later, the scene before him left him frozen in place. Inside the small room, his 3 daughters were lying next to each other. From the outside in, it was the youngest daughter, then the second daughter, and finally the eldest lying closest to the desk. Photos from the crime scene show an incredibly heartbreaking sight. The 3 sisters had been attacked and were in critical condition. The eldest daughter was rushed to the hospital, but sadly passed away upon arrival. The second daughter underwent surgery, but also succumbed to her injuries the next day. The youngest daughter, who had suffered less severe blows than her sisters, survived but required a long recovery period. Something seemed off about the scene. First, take a look. All 3 sisters died in a sleeping position. From this detail, it appears that the 3 were attacked while they were asleep, and only afterward did the fire erupt. If the fire had started first, their natural reflex would have been to panic, get up, attempt to flee, or try to extinguish the flames. However, the reality captured at the scene was that they remained lying as if in deep sleep, showing no signs of struggle. This strongly suggests that an attack preceded the fire. Secondly, flames were seen everywhere in the room, on the blankets, the wardrobe, and even the clothes scattered on the floor, suggesting it wasn't a typical fire. This raises the hypothesis that the perpetrator deliberately used flammable materials like paper to ignite small fires around the room. Thirdly, a notable point is that only the victims' heads were injured, showing signs of being struck with a blunt object. This indicates that the cause of death was severe head trauma, leading to fractures or significant blood loss. When blood is present at a crime scene, investigators often analyze bloodstains to infer the perpetrator's methods. Specifically, if there are unusual gaps among larger bloodstains, police might deduce that these gaps mark the position where the attacker stood or where the victim lay. In this case, if the assailant stood above the victim's head and attacked downward, there should be a gap in the bloodstains on the wall. However, the crime scene revealed that all the blood was concentrated on the floor and splattered closely together on the wall. This suggests only one possibility. The attacker stood at the foot of the victim and struck upwards. These were the initial assessments of the room where the 3 daughters of the homeowner slept. As for the fire in the living room, or more specifically, at the drying rack near the large window, investigators faced greater challenges in determining how the crime was committed. Let's now look at the house layout. As mentioned, it was a 2-story house, with the victim's family living on the second floor and the staircase located outside. Here is the entrance. Walking through the entrance leads directly into the living room, which features a large window. Next to this window was the burned drying rack. Adjacent to the living room is the small room where the 3 daughters, the eldest, the second, and the youngest, slept. To the left is the larger room belonging to the grandfather. The 4th daughter often slept there to keep him company. In the master bedroom, the parents shared the space with their youngest son. Now, let's reconstruct the sequence of events. At around 5:00 a.m., the father left his room. He then went to wake his elderly father. Afterward, he entered the restroom for a short while before returning to the master bedroom. During this brief period of less than 5 minutes, the fire erupted violently in the living room just as the grandfather stepped out of his room. Upon investigating the scene, police found no traces of lighters or accelerants in the living room. This complicated the initial investigation. However, one officer reported that the gas stove in the kitchen was turned on, with a pot on the burner. Given the chaos of the fire and the daughters being in distress, no one in the house would have had the composure to turn on the stove and start cooking. This led investigators to a hypothesis. The perpetrator might have used the gas stove to ignite the fire. But based on the testimony of the father and the grandfather, this theory showed inconsistencies. First, the father stated that during his brief movement between rooms, he saw no one in the kitchen. The grandfather also confirmed that he typically navigated the house by habit without turning on the lights, and on that morning no lights were on until he discovered the fire. How then could the perpetrator have quietly reached the stove and ignited a fire in such darkness? Second, both the father and grandfather testified that they had just woken up when the fire broke out. This means the time between the perpetrator starting the fire and its discovery was relatively short. Thus, it's possible the perpetrator set the fire and fled immediately. Only this could explain the brief window between the crime and its detection by the family. However, in the quiet atmosphere of 5:00 a.m., opening a door or window would normally create some noise, which could attract attention. How was the perpetrator able to escape without being noticed? This led the police to suspect that familiar morning sounds from the environment outside might have made the family less alert at that time. This is plausible because, in daily life, when we wake up in the morning, we often hear various sounds, such as cooking noises from a neighbor's house, conversations, or footsteps on the street, that we tend to ignore. In some cases, such background noise can unexpectedly lower our vigilance. Furthermore, since the household had many members, any sound of a door opening or footsteps could easily be dismissed as someone in the family getting up early to use the restroom or go out briefly. No one could have anticipated that a serious crime was occurring inside their home. Unable to determine the exact time the perpetrator escaped, the police shifted their focus to investigate how the perpetrator entered the house. The father told the police that during the fire he panicked and looked around, noticing that the front door was still securely locked. This indicated no signs of forced entry. However, during their investigation, the police discovered an alternative point of entry into the house, the large living room window. At the time of the incident, the window wasn't locked. In fact, it was slightly open, around 30 to 40 centimeters. Thus, the most likely scenario is that the perpetrator entered and possibly escaped through this large window. Although this provided a clue, the police couldn't retrieve any fingerprints or evidence from the window. This was because, at the time of the fire, upon hearing the grandfather and father shouting about the fire, many neighbors rushed over to help. They opened the windows and jumped inside to extinguish the flames. This chaotic scene made it difficult to identify any traces of the perpetrator's intrusion. Nevertheless, there was still hope for solving the case. During the investigation of the house, the CIAC team discovered a potential key piece of evidence. Specifically, they found a mark on the bedroom door handle that appeared to come from a pair of gloves with a honeycomb pattern. This strongly suggested that the gloves worn by the perpetrator during the crime left the mark. After all, it is unusual for someone to wear gloves like that inside their own home. Furthermore, such gloves had never been seen in the victim's household. However, just as they felt optimistic, the police noticed an inconsistency with this clue. According to the father's testimony, he left the bedroom, went to wake up the grandfather, then used the restroom before returning to the bedroom. Logically, when he returned to the bedroom, he would have turned the door handle, which would have partially erased or smudged the honeycomb glove mark. Yet, strangely, the honeycomb pattern glove mark on the bedroom door handle remained perfectly intact. Why was this the case? 3 possibilities could explain it. Although difficult to accept, it is possible that due to familial discord, the father himself was the perpetrator, wearing gloves and committing the crime. The second possibility is that for some reason the perpetrator touched the door handle while wearing gloves and left, after which the father entered the room by pushing the door open without touching the handle. The third scenario is that after the father entered the room, the perpetrator touched the door handle. If this is the case, it suggests that the perpetrator might have intended to harm the couple after murdering their 3 daughters. Each scenario leads to different motives for the crime. Therefore, our objective is to uncover the true motive behind the incident. Let us re-examine the crime scene and pay attention to one peculiar detail. The table might offer us a clue. First, let's focus on the wallet. Normally, when we leave the wallet at home, it's closed, not left open like this. Moreover, a card had fallen out of the wallet, indicating that someone might have rummaged through it earlier. Did the perpetrator intend to steal money? First, upon closer investigation, the police found no signs of a thorough search apart from the fallen card mentioned earlier. Notably, everything else inside the wallet remained neatly arranged. Second, this possibility was further dismissed because if the motive were theft, the perpetrator would typically target the master bedroom, where homeowners usually sleep and keep their money. To clarify, the police re-examined the master bedroom of the parents but found no signs of a search. In fact, apart from the honeycomb-patterned glove mark on the door handle, there were no traces suggesting the perpetrator had entered the couple's bedroom. If the motive wasn't theft, could it have been a sexual offense? Looking at the crime scene, all the victims were dressed in regular clothing. Additionally, the autopsy reports showed no physical injuries indicative of a sexual assault. This hypothesis was therefore immediately ruled out. Could personal revenge be a possibility? This is another possibility that the police did not dismiss. It's conceivable that one of the sisters had a conflict with the perpetrator, leading them to commit the crime as an act of revenge. Unfortunately, during the act, the other 2 sisters may have awakened, prompting the perpetrator to attack all 3. In terms of potential conflicts, the police made the following observations. First, the youngest sister, a middle school student, was polite, sociable, and led a routine life of attending school and returning home. It seemed unlikely that she had antagonized anyone to such an extent. Second, the middle sister, aged 22, had impaired hearing, lived a reclusive life, and had few relationships. The investigation revealed no evidence of any significant conflicts in her life. Third, the eldest sister. Upon investigation, the police found that the eldest sister had no disputes with anyone outside the family. However, she did have significant conflicts with her father. Once again, the situation tilted toward the hypothesis we most hoped would not be true. Should the investigation shift to consider the father as a suspect? According to the police, this possibility was impossible, as no matter how cruel a father might be, he would not kill his other 2 children solely due to a strained relationship with his eldest daughter. Because of this, the police worked even harder to investigate other leads, hoping to uncover the truth and avoid wrongfully accusing an innocent person. Indeed, after examining the evidence and constructing a timeline, the police found sufficient grounds to believe that the father was not the perpetrator. But if this was neither a robbery nor a sexual crime, and the victims had no known personal enemies, then what was the motive? What reason could justify the perpetrator silently breaking into a house with 8 people, attacking 3, setting the house on fire, and fleeing? When the investigation expanded, the police discovered several other cases in nearby areas where the victims were attacked on the head with a heavy object. Moreover, there were other similarities. The crimes were often committed between midnight and early morning, and the perpetrator predominantly targeted smaller bedrooms. To explain further, in South Korea, every house typically has a small bedroom, often used for women and children as it provides warmth and coziness. This is both an advantage and a disadvantage. as those sleeping in these rooms are more vulnerable to attacks and less likely to resist. This detail made it an ideal setting for the perpetrator's crimes. Thus, the possibility that the case involving the 3 Korean girls was part of a series of serial murders could not be ruled out. While the investigative team continued their efforts, on the early morning of April 22, 2006, another break-in occurred in Seoul. This time it was at a house in Singleodong, Seoul, and unsurprisingly, the target chosen by the perpetrator was again the small bedroom. Fortunately, in this house, the occupant of the small bedroom was not a woman but a strong 24-year-old man. When the perpetrator attacked him, the young man immediately fought back and wrestled the perpetrator to the ground. Upon hearing strange noises, the father, who was near the room, rushed in. Together, the father and son managed to overpower the criminal. When the perpetrator's tools were collected, a significant clue emerged, leaving no doubt about a connection to a series of murders. The clue was a pair of honeycomb-patterned gloves. The suspect arrested by the police was identified as Jong Nam-il, born in 1969 in Gangju, Jeollabuk-do province. He was the 7th child in a poor family with 9 siblings. According to Jong, he had been physically abused by his father as a child, sexually assaulted by a man at the age of 10, and ostracized throughout most of his teenage years. From the age of 20, Jong spent most of his life in police stations and prisons. The police had solid grounds to identify him as the perpetrator in the case involving the 3 girls because the weapon used in the case with the young man this time, a large heavy pipe wrench, matched the weapon used in the murders of the 3 unfortunate girls. Additionally, during an interrogation, he angrily admitted, "I only choose weak people to avoid being bullied," a crucial detail for the police to determine Jong as the prime suspect. When Jong Nam-il was arrested, his house was immediately searched. There, the police found dozens of crime journals, each hundreds of pages long, written by Jong as a habit. He meticulously documented his plans, the process of committing crimes, and his feelings during the acts. Jong also studied crime films, read psychology books, and collected news articles about murder cases as references. He even clipped news about his own crimes from newspapers, attaching annotations and comments. To enhance his physical fitness, Jong ran 10 kilometers 3 times a week, created specific exercises for various body parts, and followed a nutritious diet plan. During interrogation, Jong boasted that he believed his methods of committing crimes were unique. Unlike ordinary criminals who carry tools to break into houses, Jong prided himself on targeting homes with open doors or windows, making his murders easier. He specifically targeted lower-income areas with minimal security measures. His actions aimed at the less fortunate in society, treating murder as a twisted form of entertainment. Let's reconstruct what happened based on the criminal's testimony. Jong Nam-il confessed that on the night before the incident, around 10:00 p.m., he arrived at Sindorim station and began scouting for potential targets. At 5:00 a.m., he committed the crime, meaning he wandered for 7 hours, searching for houses he could break into. Standing in front of a house with 8 members, he noticed a balcony with a large open window. He climbed in slowly and entered the small bedroom. As usual, he found 3 people sleeping inside. Believing arrogantly that he could control the situation, he turned on the light. He then searched for money, but the wallet was empty. Realizing there was no point in stealing the cards, he put the wallet back and attempted to assault the second daughter, the girl sleeping in the middle. Typically, criminals target victims closest to the entrance. However, due to his overconfidence and belief in his control over the situation, he chose the girl in the middle. During the act, when the other 2 girls woke up, he raised his weapon and attacked them, including the girl in the middle. After harming the victims, he began to observe and ponder his next move. At that moment, he heard someone outside the room. It was the father who had woken up, alerted his father, the grandfather, and went to the bathroom. During this time, Jong remained in the room with the 3 daughters, waiting. After the father finished using the bathroom and returned to his room upstairs, Jong stepped out and touched the door handle. At that instant, he intended to harm the father, but decided it was too risky to locate and attack each person individually. He concluded he needed to burn down the house. Instead of destroying evidence, he turned on the gas stove and set fire to the girl's room and clothes hanging on the drying rack in the living room. Afterward, he opened the window to escape. He didn't anticipate that the grandfather would notice the clothes rack catching fire. When brought back to the crime scene for reconstruction, Jong displayed arrogance and a relaxed demeanor. When asked by reporters if he felt remorse for the victims, he pulled down his mask and smiled at the camera. That chilling smile fueled the anger of the South Korean public. Many demanded the death penalty for Jong to bring justice to the victims. At the time, South Korea still upheld the death penalty but had not executed anyone since 1997 and was considering abolishing it altogether. In court, Jong stated, "I can't feel remorse for the victims. I was caught because I was unlucky. If I hadn't been caught, I would have killed more people." He also declared, "I can quit smoking, but I can't quit this." In April 2007, Jong was sentenced to death for his lack of remorse and the likelihood of continuing his killing spree if released into society. However, just 2 years later, on November 22, 2009, he hanged himself in his cell. The case of Jong Nam-il was later portrayed in the television dramas Taxi Driver in 2021 and Through the Darkness in 2022. Ultimately, even though he was sentenced and ended his own life, the pain he caused remains an unhealed wound for the victims and their families. The haunting memories of those irreparable losses and the deep emotional scars will linger in their minds for a lifetime, difficult to ever overcome. Perhaps the remaining members of that family of 8, especially the third daughter, will forever live with anxiety, fear, and agony. Reflecting on this case, I believe the painful lessons are not merely sad stories, but also warnings for all of us, both in the present and the future. To enhance personal and community safety, each person must raise their awareness about securing their homes, protecting themselves, and safeguarding their families. Pay attention to suspicious individuals and situations around you. The use of safety technologies, such as mobile applications and installing CCTV at home, is also crucial. Finally, if you notice something suspicious, do not hesitate to report it to the authorities. Your vigilance could save someone's life. These small actions can make a significant difference in protecting yourself and the community from potentially grave threats.